Russia warns it won't stop in rebel-held zones and denies Ukraine's right to exist, fueling fears of all-out war. Russia has warned it won't halt its invasion in the rebel-held zones of Ukraine and stoked fears of all-out war by denying its neighbors' right to exist. Hours after tanks and 10,000 troops moved into pro-Russia breakaway enclaves, the Kremlin said further territory held by Ukrainian forces should belong to the two self-declared republics. Russian tanks were seen on the streets of Ukraine. Credit TikTok. Putin has ordered his troops to advance into rebel-held areas. Fireworks were let off and Russian flags were waved in the so-called Donetsk People's Republic. Credit AP. It comes after Putin gave a rambling address to Russians last night. Credit Reuters. In a further chilling development today, Russia's parliament voted to allow Vladimir Putin to use armed forces abroad. And Vladimir Putin said he is in favor of demilitarisation in Ukraine. The much-feared Russian advance began in the early hours, soon after Putin announced he recognized Luhansk and Donetsk as independent states in a bombastic TV address. Joe Biden and Boris Johnson condemned the move as an invasion and slapped sanctions on Russian banks and Putin's billionaire cronies. Meanwhile, Russia announced it was pulling its diplomats out of Ukraine, claiming staff have received threats. The move came as European Union countries unanimously agreed a package of sanctions against the country, with EU Foreign Affairs Policy Chief, Josep Borrell, warning of a particularly dangerous moment for Europe. With a huge 200,000-strong force ringing Ukraine, the world is on a knife edge waiting for Putin's next move, which could see the bloodiest conflict in Europe since World War II. Russia said it was assisting peacekeeping in the rebel-held areas following disputed claims of shelling by Ukrainian forces, and fears the tank movements were only the start of a wider Russian offensive were soon fueled by announcements from Moscow. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russia has recognized the rebel regions and borders that existed when they proclaimed their independence in 2014. This includes areas in eastern Ukraine which are currently held by Ukrainian forces on the other side of the 250-mile entrenched contact line. Mr. Putin himself later said Russia recognizes Donetsk and Luhansk within borders outlined in their constitutions. And in a blatant threat to Ukraine's existence, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Russia did not recognize its democratic neighbor's right to sovereignty. The staunch Putin loyalist said sovereignty was only for countries that represent all of their people, and he repeated Russian claims that Kiev had failed to represent its ethnic Russians. Nobody can assert that the Ukrainian regime, starting with the state coup of 2014, represents all the people who live on the territory of the Ukrainian state, he said. The word coup is a reference to the toppling of pro-Kremlin Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, who quit after protests exactly 8 years ago to the day. Putin himself then added to the tension when he asked the Russian parliament for the use of the country's military abroad. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has secretly discussed fleeing the capital Kiev, CNN reported. President Vladimir Putin launched an effective invasion of eastern Ukraine. He ordered tanks across the border into the newly recognized Donetsk and Luhansk regions. He's claimed his tanks are carrying out peacekeeping functions. But the actions could trigger bloodiest conflict since World War II. The US, UK and EU have vowed to hit Russia with sanctions today. Boris Johnson is holding a Dawn Cobra meeting to discuss the UK's response. Putin ordered the troops into the rebel areas under the guise of peacekeepers, a claim quickly dismissed as nonsense by the United States. The White House said President Joe Biden will impose sanctions to prevent any U.S. citizen doing business in the breakaway regions. We think this is, yes, the beginning of an invasion, Russia's latest invasion into Ukraine, and you're already seeing the beginning of our response, that we said will be swift and severe, Deputy National Security Advisor Jonathan Feiner told CNN. Already the situation is being compared to the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, when America and Russia were locked in a 13-day standoff that brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. He added Putin's invasion of a sovereign country could turn into a catastrophic war on a scale not seen in Europe since 1945. The UK's ambassador to the UN, Dame Barbara Woodward, said Russia has brought us to the brink, warning that the country's actions brought us to the brink. She said an invasion would unleash the forces of war, death and destruction on the people of Ukraine. And Lord West, former chief of the Royal Navy, warned one wrong move in the Russia and Ukraine crisis could spark a nuclear war. fears were growing that Moscow is now poised to move beyond the rebel-held pockets to snatch more territory from Ukraine. Russian MP Leonid Kalashnikov, a Putin loyalist, said his country would recognize the whole of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, rather than just the areas currently under rebel control. The country's deputy foreign minister Andrei Rudenko said it has the right to set up military bases in the two areas, as the Kremlin tightens its grip on them. With tensions mounting, Ukraine said 2 of its soldiers were killed and 12 others wounded in heavy shelling by rebels overnight. Later he told the Commons the UK is hitting the Putin regime with a barrage of new sanctions. The EU branded the Russian action as an act of war as the bloc was preparing to hit the Kremlin with similar sanctions. Putin said in a rambling televised address last night, "We demand that those who have seized and are retaining power in Kiev immediately halt all hostilities." Yasenuvit is just 9 miles from the 250-mile First World War-style contact line of trenches which has separated Ukrainian and pro-Russian separatists for the past 8 years. The president has signed off orders to parliament which made Russia the first country in the world to recognize the 2 mini-states created when he orchestrated a land grab in 2014. The last paragraph of his orders to parliament said he was ordering Russian armed forces to provide peacekeeping on the territory of Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic. In a further alarming development, Russia's parliament was also said to be adopting plans to build military bases in self-declared Donetsk and Luhansk, and stay for 10 years.